Well, hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we have a very special guest. First of all, I'm going to introduce my daughter. She wants to just come say hi to everybody with the puppy that we are giving to Grandma and Grandpa for Christmas. So, squat down, Sadie. Just so they'll be able to see it. So,
hi.
Just say hi and go have fun with the dog while
More
we're
like I'm going to lounge in bed.
doing this. Don't destroy the house. Okay, good job. But today we have my parents here making their very first YouTube appearance with me and ever. And we were going to talk to them today about their experiences from being Jehovah's Witnesses. My father here was an elder for many years inside the organization, and of course my mother being an elder's wife. So we're going to talk about a whole bunch of things, and we're going to start off first of all, and I'm going to start off with you, Dad.
Okay.
Let's just hear a little bit of a backstory on how you came to be a Jehovah's Witness.
Well, I was born in, like many people I've known, that I grew up with. My parents found the organization back in 1953 and were baptized. And about a year later, I came along in June of '54. So all I've ever known was being in as a witness. Basically, it was meetings from as far back as I could remember on Thursday night, Sunday, Tuesday. And the thing was, back then when I was growing up, those Thursday night meetings, they were sometimes 2.5, maybe 3 hours long, depending.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, depending on what the material was for the night. And it was the same with the Watchtower study on Sundays. I know now they're very strict on keeping it to an hour or whatever it is now. But back then, it could go up to an hour and a half or longer. It all depends. So anyway, being raised that way, I was where we lived in central Illinois. The schools I went to, I was the only witness kid. And it made it very hard because I was very adamant about, what I was taught to believe. And basically, I had teachers that did not like me and openly told me so. I had in my third grade, when I was in third grade, the teacher there would purposely try to force me to salute the flag or make fun of me, always degraded me in front of the whole class. So that was how I was raised at first. And then finally, when I got in the 5th and 6th grade, I had a real good teacher that hated all this prejudice, and he took me under his wing and got me caught up in a lot of academics and all that. And that was the same. It was easier as I grew up when I got into high school, because finally in high school, saluting the flag at that time was not something we did anymore, and a child was able to blend in. So basically that was where I came from as a child. And
So just so our audience knows, we're talking about the late 50s to early 60s on into the early 70s. Correct. Of you growing up in the religion. Yeah.
The one thing I didn't mention was my parents used to rent a travel trailer that was on their property for a while, and we lived out in the country, and we had this one individual who was the presiding overseer renting it, and he was actually a pedophile. Didn't know what a pedophile was back then. And I remember one day I had a witness friend over, which was very rare, and we were playing, and all of a sudden he disappeared. And I went over to the travel trailer, and I heard noise in there. And instead of knocking, I just walked in, and I saw him standing there naked in front of my friend. And I ran away from out there, and he went and chased me, and he beat me up to where I was unconscious. Actually choked me until I went unconscious. And as a little child, I remember going back into my bedroom you know, kind of licking my wounds. And I actually put it behind, in back of my mind. I totally forgot about it until later on in life.
You know, that's actually a story you've never even told me. I've never
Really?
heard. I've really never heard that story until right now.
Really? Okay.
Seriously. So that's news to me. Wow.
Well,
wow.
Yeah. When I went to therapy, eventually, I was in my early 50s at the time, because I was just fighting depression and those kind of things. You know, for men, lots of anger, depression, you know, all kinds of stuff I suffered with throughout my whole life. Drove my poor wife nuts with it. And when I finally got to the remembering that, it was earth-shattering to me. And when I finally remembered it and put all the pieces together, that's when I started getting better mentally in so many ways.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for starting us off there. And let's go on to Mom. And now, Mom, you weren't born into being a Jehovah's Witness. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about your life before you became a Jehovah's Witness, and then, you know, how you came to become one.
Well, no, you're right. I was not born as a Jehovah's Witness. I don't know what it was like to be raised as a Jehovah's Witness, like you and your father do. I was raised in a fairly decent family. We were not dysfunctional to my knowledge. My dad was agnostic. He loved science. He was raised by a very fundamentalist Christian mother who punished him for playing cards and for playing ball on Sunday, and he hated religion. And we had long talks about science. Well, about the time I was about 14 years old, in the 8th grade, about the same age as your daughter, as a matter of fact. I met a couple of girls in school, and they were talking about evolution, and I loved science at that time and evolution, and I thought, oh boy, I can really get into this discussion with them. And so we started talking about evolution, and it kind of went to the evolution. They said, well, you know, maybe this happened, or this could have happened, or there's missing links, and so on and so on. And so they convinced me that evolution was not a fact, that it was creation. So then from that point on, we got into another book, and we started studying the little book called The Truth That Leads to Eternal Life. It was this little blue book. It was 25 cents, which I could afford at the time. And so I bought that book. And we talked a lot in school. But then they said, well, would you like to study the Bible? To study this little book. And yeah, I was a student. I love studying, learning something new. That was great, you know. So they came over to my house, and we had a Bible study, and my mom disappeared into the bedroom. She was crying. Oh, they didn't want me to be part of have these people in my house and all this and that. And I go, what's wrong with that? And I'd had discussions with my dad, and by this time I knew that Jehovah's Witnesses didn't go to war. They didn't have paid preachers. They didn't take up a collection plate. So these things that were all appealing to me, and my dad kind of liked that too, although he knew they also came to knocking on the doors, and he didn't like them knocking on the doors, disturbing him on Saturdays. But he respected me, and he kind of smoothed things over with my mom, and so it went on like that. But they never had a study again in the house. Then from that point on, I studied during lunch at school, and then when school was out and I could drive, I would go to their house, or we would meet at the mall and have little Bible studies.
So you were one of those kids that like to sneak around, and the organization loved to use as an example as far as how students can come in, you know, not only just become witnesses from being preached at in school, but also you sneaking around behind your parents to do this. And that was probably like, oh wow, see, this really does happen.
Well, sometimes I was allowed to have the literature at home, and then there would be a time where they no, get rid of it all. So I'd either keep it in my locker at school, or I'd keep it at my girlfriend's house, and I go over there and visit, and we have that. So that went on, and at that period of time, this was about 1966, 1967 when we started, and the Vietnam War was raging at that time period. And there was a lot of anti-war movement at the time. And so the things that they showed me in that little blue book about the times of the end really kind of resonated, because here you see one of them was you hear of wars and reports of wars in one place after another, famines, earthquakes, and they were preaching, so they used that as part of their fulfillment of the prophecy and the sure signs that we were in the time of the end.
Well, also, if you're going back to that era, 1968 Awake magazine, we're going to be talking about that in a few minutes with both of you, but that article on why are you looking forward to 1975. So that was also the time they were preaching and pushing the end of the world narrative, and surely it's probably something that helped hook you into this.
It was a big hook, and it was very strong. It was a very strong pull at the time. Now, they wanted you to study for 6 months and get baptized. Well, I was still living in my parents' house, and my parents objected to me studying and anything. So I was able to put off being baptized for quite a while. So it wasn't until I was actually 20 years old, and I'd left home. I graduated from high school. I went to 2 years of junior college. I majored in biology, by the way, which seems kind of like, doesn't quite fit in with that. But anyways, I did. I loved it. And then I moved across. I was living in Florida, and I moved from the east coast of Florida, near West Palm Beach, to the west coast of Florida, north of Tampa, where my aunt had a house. And I began renting a little studio apartment from her. And I located the Kingdom Hall. And then I came back. I drove back to West Palm Beach it was the West Palm Beach Auditorium. We dubbed it, it was also dubbed the Leaky Teepee, and that's where I was baptized. And then later on, I understand it became the society bought it, it became a assembly hall or convention center.
And just for clarification, what year were you baptized?
1973.
1973.
Isn't that interesting?
It is interesting. So, and Dad, what about you? What year were you baptized?
I know exactly. September 12th, 1970, at the not the Bayfront Center, at the St. Petersburg High School facility. And it was I remember it was a trough. They had this big trough. And when we went in the water to get baptized, at least when I did, it was so hot, it turned my skin red.
Oh,
so when after I got out and went back to the dressing room, one of the newly baptized brothers was saying, are they trying to cook us? We're baptizing. So I remember that quite well.
So they were really trying to wash you clean, huh?
Oh, yeah.
So, okay, you already touched on it a little bit. Let's go a little bit more into detail. So now you're both baptized, and we just mentioned the Awake article from 1968 about why are you looking forward to 1975. So let's talk about that. Let's start with you, Dad, on your impression of it, how things were for you, just your general experience of the whole 1975 issue.
Well, when that came out in 68, I was just 14. I could care less what the Watchtower was saying. I never read them. I went to the meetings. I didn't understand half of what I was listening to, but it was the religion that, I knew was the truth, or what I thought was the truth as a child. And I remember, the only reason I remember that article so well is my dad got hold of me and says, I just want you to know, son, you're never going to have to worry about a career in this system of things. You won't have to go to school and learn this or learn that, because it's all going to end by 1975. And he was very strong about that. And by him telling me that, he really, in many ways, took away opportunities I would have wanted to take as I got older, especially in high school. And just having an education didn't have to be college. Just a good, trade school would have been fine for me. I was never what you would call a student like my wife is, Barbara. But still, it took away opportunities. And even after we were married, there was opportunities I did not take because 1975 was coming. It was the end of the world. And the only thing I had on my mind was I wanted to find a mate.
So let's just briefly touch upon that too. So how did you two meet? Go ahead, Mom. You tell us. Usually the women remember this better anyway. So.
Well, I was working at Eckerd Drugs.
Yeah.
And I was going to the Kingdom Hall at the time. Your dad at the time was behind the literature counter.
Oh, the sexy literature counter man.
And he kept trying to draw me in to talk to me. And
do you want to read a book?
No.
No. You got to go back to Eckerd Drugs first.
Okay, and at Eckerd Drugs, well, he knew me and he knew who I was. And when he saw me at Eckerd Drugs, I was the main cashier in the front of the store. And I had to handle all the tobacco products. Now, I didn't smoke or anything, but I didn't want any of it, but that was part of my job. And he comes in and also the shift was 1 week I'd miss every other meeting because the shifts would change. You would change shifts. And so I would either, so he comes in and he says, you can't be missing meetings. You can't be working here behind the handling tobacco products, So you need to get another job.
Yeah.
Who are you telling me this,
I was Mr. Elder.
Yeah, he was Mr. Elder.
At 18 and 19.
Yeah.
You dick.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And then your mom came, and she invited me over to the house after work one day. So, and remember, they lived in the subdivision behind Eckerd Drugs. So after work, I'm in my uniform, and I drive over. And she didn't tell me it was a party. It was a bridal shower that she was at for friends. And I was so embarrassed. I didn't have any gift. I didn't know what it was. I was in my uniform. I wasn't dressed up and all this. And I believe we sat and talked.
I was in hog heaven.
And anyway, so that was that. And then we kind of...
The thing she forgot to say. She's right on that. I forgot about that story. But I used to go into Eckerd Drugs to get rubber gloves to wear because I was a stucco and plasterer. And back then we used a lot of lime and it would eat your skin up. So we had to wear these big Playtex rubber gloves. I was buying Playtex rubber gloves. And she's up there working. And she goes, "Hi there, how you doing?" And she's smiling. And I'm looking, I go, "Who's that girl?" I was like, I didn't know who she was at first until later on. I met her at the Kingdom Hall, and then all these other things fell in place. Yeah, I forgot about your story. Yeah. I was a mean guy back then.
You were.
Yeah.
Sometimes you still are.
Well, folks, let's just say that lasted a very long time.
Hey, if it wasn't for that, you wouldn't have been around.
But, so, okay. So, you all met. So, how long was it after you two started dating, that you got married?
Well, here's the interesting thing on a date that we went on. My parents came up to visit, and we were, I guess we were kind of semi-dating at the time. Not really dating, just kind of talking to each other, basically. So my parents were going to take me out to eat, and I invited David to come along. And so we went to a dinner theater in St. Petersburg. And we were sitting in the back see, but the thing I didn't tell him was that it was October 29th. And the reason I know that, because that's my mother's birthday. So we got to the dinner theater, and after dinner, my mother got a big birthday cake and all this. And so it's like, you didn't tell me it was your mother's birthday. I was still so new in the organization that I didn't realize all the ins and outs of all
I forgot
these
this story too. Oh my God, what did I get into?
And you're going, what am I getting into? So I go, oh my goodness, is he going to ask me again on another date? And I go, okay, so.
Well, the thing was, the very moment I met your mom, I knew she was the girl I was going to marry. And the funny story was, we were dating, and my mom was very upset that I was dating Barbara.
Even though she introduced us.
Even though she introduced us.
Of course.
And at any rate, it was on a Thanksgiving a Thanksgiving weekend on a Thursday, and we went out in field service, and there was a picnic afterwards with our congregation. Well, my parents were not there for some reason or another, but we were there. We were having the picnic. Barb and I were sitting there among all the friends there, so we were well chaperoned. And I says, I looked at her, and I says, you know, dear, I really love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And a week from now, which would have been December 1st, I'm going to propose to you for marriage. So I gave her a week's notice.
So he gave you a heads up, so you really had a good chance to think about it, huh?
Yeah, and I still said yes. Yeah.
What were you thinking?
I know. But it wasn't December 1st.
No.
We were over at friend's house on December 1st that night, and we were playing at the Trollsons. We got to playing cards and laughing, and it went so late that it was after midnight that we broke up and went home.
What year was that?
1973.
1973. Okay.
Towards the end, yeah.
Towards the end. So
December 1st, 2nd, 1973.
And the reason why I bring that up. So how long were you two dating before he proposed to you?
I don't remember exactly how long. It wasn't very long.
If it was, I started dating her seriously in the middle of September or October. It was only like 2.5 months, a little over 2 months.
Yeah.
So we're talking from that time, September, October, 1973, and then you got married in March of 1974.
Correct.
I want to give you the little story about that. He did propose after he took me home. So it was actually December 2nd that he proposed, and I accepted. And remember, I was living in an apartment at my aunt's house. Well, my aunt had loved to go camping, and she had a little Scotty trailer, and it was a warm night in Florida, and she couldn't sleep, so she was outside in her camper. And when he proposed, she heard the whole thing.
But pulled in right next to the camper,
Yeah.
right where her bedroom was in
Yeah.
the camper, with her window open, and our windows were rolled down.
And the next morning, there was a dozen roses delivered to me.
Yeah.
And she sat in her chair and she goes, "Barbie, you want to tell me something?"
Yeah.
I go, "Oh yeah." So that was
Okay, so I had you talk about all that because we're still on the whole issue of 1975.
Yeah.
Okay, and so how heavily? I'm going to start with you, Mom, on this one. How heavily do you think that the date of 1975 influenced your decision to get married?
Well, we're in dire anticipation of Armageddon, of course. And yes, I didn't want to go through this alone, to tell you the truth. I wanted somebody to go through with me. And he came along, and I thought, he's as good as any. So
there were others?
No.
I'm just joking.
No. So, yeah. I kind of liked him. attended to.
Yeah,
It
kind of,
it
yeah.
wasn't just
And I'm gonna ask the same question to you, Dad. You know, how heavily do you think 1975 influenced?
Big time. I wanted to get married. I wanted to be married before 75. And I found a gal that agreed to it. And we got married. And, you know, and that year was a turbulent year. The year we got married was Watergate was taking place. Nixon resigned. There was, you know, a lot of things taking place in the world.
And so I'm sure with all those things taking place, when the Watchtower says, "Hey, 1975 is it,"
Yeah.
when you see all these things happening, you're like, "Oh my goodness, these are all the signs. This is all really coming to a head,
Yeah.
isn't it?" So it was just
Yeah.
like
Oh, yeah.
in your minds, it was probably making it more and more urgent that you get there.
Yeah.
And he wanted to get married really soon, and I was kind of trying to put him off a little bit, not you know. But we were actually married. I'll give you the date: March 23rd, 1974. So, and yeah, and we were married, of course, in the Kingdom Hall. So.
And just for purposes, how many years have you been married now this year?
Well, this coming year will be in March of 2021. We'll be married 47
years.
So,
47.
Yeah.
as of the recording of this, though, this is now December of 2020,
Mhm.
and it's Christmas Eve. So you've been married 46 years,
Yes.
and you two went through the organization for many years together,
Yeah.
and eventually came out. And I'm only saying that just to give our listeners kind of a perspective
That's,
of
Yeah.
how long you two have also been in it together. As well.
And to add to that, we officially left the organization. I always say January, but we went to the memorial with you in April of 2011.
mm-hmm.
So really, whether you say January or April, we've been officially out for 10 years.
Well, we'll get to that later. That we're working our way up to that.
Oh, okay.
So
Sorry.
no, that's fine. But so now back to 1975. Now let's talk about a little bit. 1975 came.
Mm-hmm.
1975 went.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're talking here in 2020, and Armageddon still hasn't come. So, what was it like in those months, those a couple years after 1975 passed? And tell our listeners about what the organization did. Folks, this is coming from people that actually lived through this. So when the organization tries to tell you one thing, these people actually lived through it.
Mhm.
Let's hear what they have to say.
Well, your mom and I were having our doubts. You know, hey, it came and went, and So I said, we said, well, we know who to go talk to. My parents, especially my dad. He was an elder, and you knew your grandpa, how strong he was in the faith, to the point of, dictatorship as far as it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we went to them, and we go, Dad, what's going on? The society said 75. It didn't happen because this was 76 now, around that time. And, and they were saying this and that. Did they lie to us? And, oh, boy, did he get angry with us. He started saying how we were acting like, he don't think he used the word apostates, but he might as well had. And he says, don't you believe in the truth? And, don't you believe in Jehovah? And he was livid. And we finally just said, no, we're just wondering. We're not, we backed down quite a bit on that.
Yeah, we were kids.
Well, yeah.
And basically that kept us in the organization for quite a while because of that incident.
Well, I don't know whether it was in the literature or whether it was a conjecture on certain elders' parts. But there was what was going around at that time was that, well, it's been 6,000 years from the creation of Adam to 1975. But we don't know how long it was from the time Adam was created to the time Eve was created. That could have been another 10, 20, 30 years maybe that Adam was alone. And so maybe Armageddon isn't going to come until Eve was created. Now, that kind of bought another 20 years more or less.
And on top of that, they also blamed us, the publishers, for being over enthusiastic about something they said, but they kind of denied that they said it, but yet it's there in the literature. And then I think finally around 1980 or 81, somewhere around there, they finally apologized that, you know, what they said.
And I know I've heard the audio clips of a circuit overseer that was given a talk prior to 1975, and I'm going to go ahead and show the little clip of it right here.
Well, now, as Jehovah's Witnesses, as runners, even though some of us have become a little weary, it almost seems as though Jehovah has provided meat in due season, because he's held up before all of us a new goal, a new year, something to reach out for, and it just seems it's given all of us so much more energy and power in this final burst of speed for the finish line. And that's the year 1975.
But in that video clip, he said, you know, to stay alive to 75. So it was, and that was a motto coming down from the top of the organization. So with just that alone being announced at a district convention, how the hell could they blame the publisher? Now, we know how they can. We don't need to really get into that because of the way the organization is. But that's just the way they do things. And so we just can't, it's hard to wrap your head around, especially if you never were part of it.
I kind of think of on this one XJW site I was on for quite a while, that there was always people would be like that. Well, how could they have done that? And he goes, let's review this. And he writes, it's a cult.
Yeah.
And that's exactly.
Well, exactly. But, and that's what they do though. They'll tell you one thing. They'll tell you, hey, Armageddon's coming in 1975. 75 comes, 75 comes and goes. And then, well, now it's your fault because you were, you know, like, the old saying, you were getting ahead of Jehovah's chariot. You know, that's one they like to use, you know. And, yeah.
Well, and another thing, too, is you're in this organization. You're only supposed to have friends in the organization. When I came in, I basically cut off my other family to be part of this family. Now, I still had contact with them, but it wasn't like a family. So now I'm invested in this. Okay, I've invested my life into this. I'm married now. 1977, my first child was born. Okay, 1982, my second child was born. Wonder who that was.
I heard he's a really handsome guy.
He is pretty smart too. He has his own YouTube channel.
Tell them what the sister said to you when they found out you were pregnant with Tim.
When I was pregnant with Tim, the sister said, you know, they looked at me like, pregnant? Whoa. And there's a scripture, woe to the pregnant woman in the last days.
Yeah.
And that's what I heard.
So nice.
Yeah, how nice. Well, what do I got to do? Have an abortion?
Never fails, what can I say?
Yeah. So, yeah. So, and so you're so invested in it that even if the prophecies don't happen, like they say, you still turn it around in your mind, contort it somehow to make it fit so that you can tell yourself that it's okay to be in this organization.
And that's what they call the sunk cost fallacy. Because you've invested so much time, it could be time, it could be money, that if it's not true, well, it can't be not true because I've invested all this time and energy into it. And that's one of the big things this organization gets people into is that investment of their time in their lives, and that's how they keep them hooked in. Now, let's go ahead and move on to a little bit further. So we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is me, of course. But really, though, we're going to go ahead and talk about my birth. And I know I mentioned this in my complete story video, but I want to hear it from your guys' perspective, not just mine. So what happened at my birth?
Well, the first birth I had was a difficult birth. And we were living in Knoxville, Tennessee when I was pregnant with you. And I found out I was pregnant. And some friends in the congregation knew a doctor that would probably take me. And his name was Dr. Simmer. And he had a couple girls working for him in the office who were Jehovah's Witnesses. And he was also like the head of the whole department there. I mean, he was the one of God, the university, yeah, the gynecology department at the University of Tennessee, teaching hospital. And he accepted me as a patient. So, come the day of to give birth, we go to the hospital, and I'm progressing pretty well. We signed papers previously. I need to mention that neither I nor the child will accept a blood transfusion due to our faith. So as it got time for they had monitors in me, and all of a sudden the monitor flatlined, and you had stopped breathing in the womb, and you defecated, and you swallowed some of it, and they had to get you out really, really fast. So we had an emergency cesarean. But when I was coming out from under the anesthesia in the recovery room, the head of the pediatric intensive care came in, and he said, "Mrs. Winter, I know you've signed papers not to have a blood transfusion, but if you don't allow me to give your baby a blood transfusion, he will not live the day out." And your dad was in there with me, and of course he spoke up, and he said no, he wouldn't allow it. And then the doctor turned to me, and I was coming out from under some pretty heavy anesthesia at the time, and he said, "Well, Mrs. Winter, I need your answer." And I said, "Absolutely not." Mm-hmm. So you didn't get it. So then the doctor said, "Well, I guess I'm going to have to get a court order." So we said, "Okay, you do what you do, you do what you have to do," and that's all we could do. And but my doctor said, "Well, he said,
well, he came in later.
Okay, well, you know more about this than I. Maybe I should let you take it from here, because
you remember quite a bit.
Pretty groggy."
Yeah. Well, when you were starting to come out, I wanted to go back. Your delivery was going real fast, and as we say, all hell broke loose with the umbilical cord wrapped around your neck and all these other things. Your heart stopped beating. And it was funny, back then there was a controversy medically whether having the monitor outside the belly for a heartbeat or inside. And they did the one inside, and that's how they caught the fact that your heart, stopped beating. Well, at any rate, they actually had to push you back into her, your mother. And they had, I don't know how many people around your mother holding her down. Your mother was screaming a scream I've never heard her, because it was very painful. And they finally put her out, and, they all went across the hallway to the other room and delivered. And I was standing there by the door, and I had some nurse tell me to get out of there. I have no business being there. And I says, that's my wife and child. I don't care. Get out of here. So I had to go somewhere else. Well, at any rate, after she got back in the room, she was coming out of it. And, of course, the one guy was trying to push the blood transfusion. And she was coming out, and she said no. Well, at that point, we both prayed. And I said this prayer. And that's when our primary doctor came in and says, "What's going on?" And we told him what happened. He says, and this guy was God at this hospital. He was God. And he says, "Well, let me see what I can do." And he went down, talked to that guy, and he came back, I don't know, half an hour later or so, and he says, "I just want you to know, we're not going to do anything. But if your son condition goes downhill, then we're going to have to go with it." And we were relieved, and we were happy. So there again, our faith was cemented.
Our prayers were answered.
Our prayer was answered. And the other reason our prayer was answered, it wasn't too long after that, we started hearing about AIDS. And it was not among homosexuals. It was in the blood. And we go, "Oh my God, James." And there was all kinds of children that they had on the news that was coming down with AIDS because of blood transfusions that was given to them. Again, our prayers were answered. It, saved you from all that.
You were seeing it as wisdom from Jehovah
Exactly.
coming down because, oh wow, this disease is out there. My child avoided it and he's fine because of it.
It made us
And
more,
not only did you survive, but you thrived.
You thrived.
Yeah, you were a very, very healthy child.
Yeah. So, that's a pretty heavy situation for any young couple to go through, especially in a situation when their child's life is literally at stake.
I just want to say, remember too, there were no hospital liaison committees at that time.
No.
We were on our own for that. We made this decision on our own.
No elders were there.
No elders visited.
Well,
so
really, and I'll say yes and no to that because you were still coerced by the organization
Yes.
through their propaganda to make that decision in the end.
Yes.
Whether you had somebody over your shoulder or not to make it.
It just goes to show you
how we felt at the time.
Right.
At the
Exactly.
time.
Exactly.
That was the
And that's
point.
the point I wanted to bring out though was, it's not when you're in that organization, you sometimes think things are your decision, but they're really not. Those decisions have already been handed to
Exactly.
you
Yeah,
over and over and over again. That's why they always repeat everything they
I
say.
agree.
And so by the time you got to that situation, again, it wasn't your decision. It was the organization's decision for you
Mm-hmm.
about my health.
Yes.
Which, I mean, obviously I'm thankful that it worked out, but how many other people has it not worked out for? How many children have died for lack of a blood transfusion when they needed one?
Mm-hmm.
It's only been the last 10 years your mother and I have had that discussion many times.
Mm-hmm.
And we sit there in awe on why in the world did we do what we did. We were jeopardizing our son. It was in the cult because of, they say, oh, they're a loving organization. There's such lack of love, even in things of this caliber, that we were willing to sacrifice you,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and it was really because of lack of love for our own child, and we were sacrificing you over in my opinion, a God that doesn't exist.
So anyways, let's go on a little bit because it's so sad, that whole situation, no matter how you look at it. Even with me surviving it and being healthy, it's still a sad situation.
No.
It's even more of a sad situation for those who didn't survive or lost their lives because of a lack of those transfusions. And I know you probably remember the 94 Watchtower article that had all those kids on there that died because of not getting a blood transfusion.
Yes.
So I could have easily been a martyr for Watchtower just as much as those other kids.
The most despicable.
We realize that now.
And I know you do.
It's a perspective. Yeah, this perspective of time really puts everything in a totally different light, and also the perspective of being outside the box of the cult.
Yeah.
And that's why I think stories like this are really important to get out there because people need to know.
Mm-hmm.
Not only just people who are studying with Jehovah's Witnesses, but people who have been in for many years to get this perspective from outside the box and see what really happens, even though they know it happens.
Yeah. Well,
But they tend to just, because of that indoctrination, they block it off and they push it away.
they always like to use the example of, you know, you put a frog in a pan of water, you know, and turn the heat up. It doesn't realize it's being boiled alive. And really, the cult, like the Watchtower, uses the same thing. You know, it's gradually, at least in my lifetime, these things were, you know, taught to us and indoctrinated into us, you know, gradually about so many things, so many things, that this was just another one. And we, you know, how you dress, how you act, how your hair's cut, on and on and on and on. You know, how many times do you have sex with your mate? You know, how many children should you have? They just controlled you in so many aspects. It was ridiculous.
No. Well, let's start going into that a little bit more, because let's start with you, Deb, because you were an elder for how many years before you left?
Just a few months shy of 25 years.
25. So when were you appointed as an elder?
Oh boy, way too young. I was 32 years old, and in 1986, I think it was September, my name was announced in 1986.
1986. Okay. So now, from my perspective, in 86, I was only 4 years old, so I don't remember before that too well. From my perspective, you were always an elder, because that's just what I remembered. You know, I grew up in the Kingdom Hall, where you and Grandpa, your dad, were elders in the same congregation. And so let's go and talk about your life as an elder. Let's also relate maybe an experience or two from being an elder.
I was one of those elders that I wanted to change things for the better for the congregation. There was things I didn't like, you know, how elders treated other publishers in the hall, how they gave talks, things they would say up there that were not appropriate. And I said, well, as an elder, I'm going to try to make changes. Stupid me. I had nothing to say about what was what. Everything was written in black and white from the governing body on what we did not do. We had elder schools, you know, ever so many years. We had, when the circuit overseer came in town, more stuff from the Watchtower that were, you know, basically instructions on elders for what they can and can't do and how they should handle this and that. And it was, you know, we were constantly being told what to do. We did not really have freedom to think for ourselves. And because of that, it made for some really, really bad elders. Hence
why you had a book, your elder's manual, that only elders in the congregation got. And tell us about what you were instructed to do and not do with it.
Oh, well, my first elder's book I had, what was interesting, they says, now please, we're at the elder school and we're going through wherever we were at in the book. And he says, now notice the columns there were empty spaces. Please write this in. And word for word. And of course, me, I'm a horrible speller and, you know, ADHD, you know, and, you know, I'm putting this all in. And I go, well, why don't they just give us a paper that's written on, you know, typed, and we could just paste it in there. I never could understand that. You know, so we were writing all this stuff in. Well, now I know why. You know, it was legal purposes. They could say, well, he wrote that in there. That's not what we said. You know, what's the word I'm looking for? Deniability?
Plausible deniability.
Yeah. And so that's what they were doing. You know, I realized that afterwards, but back at that time, I was always questioning, why do we have to write all this in?
You're not supposed to question things. Don't you know that?
Yes, I know.
How dare you?
Well, you know, a couple of times I went against some of their stuff because I thought it was too harsh. I remember one thing, you know, especially when the pedophilia was taking place more, and we were learning about child abuse and never heard about, we didn't even know what child abuse was until around 1990, 91, never even heard of it. until we heard it on the news where we lived. And but at any rate, I remember this one case. I was on this committee, and this sister was suffering with alcoholism real bad. And after it was, just at the end, and I was chairman of that committee, and she ended up being disfellowshipped, and she even asked to be disfellowshipped because she was doing other things too. But before we ended, I looked at her in the eyes. I says, "I'm not supposed to be saying this, and I may get in trouble for saying this, but please get professional help for your alcoholism." And lo and behold, she came back about a year and a half later, and she says, "David, I did that. I went and got help." And I'm at that time, I think she was like 14, 15 months, not drinking. So that was going against the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Because they didn't want us to give any so-called medical advice. Where, I don't consider it medical advice. I didn't tell her how she could do it. I just said, just get help. We weren't allowed to do that stuff, and then I don't know if you want me to go into the sex abuse or anything like that, how they control this.
Well, see, you mentioned you started hearing about the sexual abuse in the early 90s, right?
Yeah.
Now, let me bring up something about that. And this is not something I've actually talked about a whole lot on my channel either. And I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, but I'm going to bring out some details about it that pertain to actually what you know about and what you heard about back at that time. Of course, I didn't learn about this until later either. But my wife was sexually abused as a child. And the perpetrator was the one who was on the news that you were talking about in our area down in Florida. And it wasn't only her that he had gotten.
No.
He had gotten plenty of other people. And because he was on the news, I remember my wife was telling me that she was in the kitchen with her mom, and her mom goes, "Oh my God, can you believe that he would do such a thing?" And my wife looked at her mom when that happened, and she goes, "Yes, I can, because he did it to me." And that was the first time she brought up that she had been abused to her parents. And now, of course, years later, now I've married her and everything. I remember her dad telling me, of course, her dad is also an elder and has been for many years, even back then in the early 90s, that because of that situation, he said, and I don't believe it, after learning about how the organization really handles it, I don't believe this for a second, but he said, well, because of her case, the organization changed its policies on how they handle it. And at the time, I'm thinking, okay, that's really cool. That's awesome that they did some. Of course, now looking back and learning what we have about how they really handle it, I know it's a bunch of crap. But you saw it. Now we were in completely different congregations,
about 20 miles away from where this happened.
Right.
And it was all on the news, it was not just the newspapers, but on TV news. And all of a sudden, as soon as they hit the news, days later, we got a letter from the Watchtower Society on how elders should answer questions to reporters concerning this. And it was quite, a very robot-like answer to their questions, whatever it may be. And but we never had any reporters come to our Kingdom Hall or anything like that. But I thought it was amazing how they sent this letter out in that area to elders on how they should answer the questions about child abuse. And, I look back now, I go, at the time I thought, oh, that was nice. But, now I look back, I guess it was more control, more hiding of what was taking place in the organization. And of course, then they came out with that Awake magazine on child abuse. And, oh my God, I talked to Barbara Anderson years ago on telephone. And she was saying that just opened up a floodgate of, abuse victims. And Watchtower realized they opened up a big can of worms, and it has never ended for them. Thank goodness, because the organization I dealt with through the years as an elder, only I think 2 or 3 pedophile accusations, and it wasn't it was always ones that were abused. They were adults and they were abused by their father, and the father was an elder, and this was like 20, 30 years ago. And through the instruction of the Watchtower, I know the one individual in our Kingdom Hall was removed as an elder, wasn't allowed to give parts or prayers or anything anymore. And and the other guy, well, he ended up dying. We knew him real well, Harvey.
Now, let me ask you something. Were you ever on a judicial committee for any of them?
I was on the one I just talked about, and I wasn't on any real big juicy ones. I warned our congregation about this one individual I just said that moved from one hall to the congregation I was in. They were ready to appoint him as a ministerial servant.
Let me pause you right there. So when you say you warned the congregation, let's be specific.
Warned the elders.
Just the elders. Okay,
Yeah.
So that's a big difference,
No,
though.
you're right.
Because
You're right.
the congregation is the entire group
You're
of
right.
people that go.
You're right.
It's a
You're
big
right.
distinction because that's what the elders do. They're told to do. They're told not to tell the regular rank and
The
file.
congregation didn't know about it. You're
But
correct.
I will tell you, though, I do remember you telling me as a teenager in that hall in Newport Richey to watch out for that guy.
Yeah.
And I remember you telling me specifically, and then you're like, don't tell anybody else.
Yeah.
But you warned me. So,
Yeah. He was pretty nefarious. Yeah. So at any rate, I warned them. They had no idea, because the letter they got from the other congregation never mentioned it. And I remember in the other, because that guy ended up in prison for a few years.
yeah.
He was quite notorious. Well, at any rate, I wasn't. That's the only thing I dealt with on that. And the other one was a child, and basically he was being seduced in sex with some other of his boyfriends in the congregation. And they were all like 12, 13, 14, at that age where, boys, even girls are exploring their sexuality. Anyway, they were messing around with each other. Well, this one boy, unfortunately, wanted to go mess around with one of the neighborhood kids that was, 8 years old or something like that. And he did. And his parents caught him, and they called the police on him. And I was on that judicial committee. He wasn't even baptized. And they ended up, he came close to going to reform. They don't call it reform school anymore, whatever.
Now, without saying people's names, was that the family that I was going to have you relate this experience to, of the father who called in the middle of the night that one night?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear on that.
They were the notorious ones, because they were.
Well, I thought there was another family that had some issues too, that I knew of. Where the wife had her legs cut off. I was thinking it was one of those two families.
Both of them are related. Their boy and
okay.
the other one's boy.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
Anyway, that was the only pedophile one I was on. Except the one with, the elder. I remember we were on with the kids. We were on the phone with the legal department, because you're supposed to call the legal department when you get on this. And right off the bat. And we were on the legal department. They basically told us exactly how we need to state things, word for word, and what we need to do, as far as calling the police and this and that. And that was that. That's what we did.
Right.
And so, but I knew so many witnesses. sisters my age. Now at that point I was in my 30s, going into my 40s, and I don't know how many couples we met where one of them or the other was sexually abused as a child in the organization. It was just unbelievable. It got to the point where I was talking to a circuit overseer about this. This was getting towards the last few years I was an elder and in North Florida. And, we were talking about that, about a certain brother that he insisted on wanting to become a ministerial servant. I told him, well, we can't because of this and that. And, oh, I didn't know that. And I says, yeah. I says, being down from where I came from, was relating to him all the cases I heard. And he goes, oh, he says, I think that the Watchtower has only known about 1 or 2 cases of child abuse.
Oh, jeez.
He was lying to me, and I looked him straight in the eye. And I says, well, I guess I know all of them, plus another 10. And he just looked at me, and then he walked away. And this is when, both your mom and I were starting to wake up.
Of course, so that was probably, around 2007, 2008, roughly?
Yeah, I'd say roughly.
That. And reason why I bring that up is because 7-8 years later, we had the Australian Royal Commission, which blew the top right off of the problem that the organization really has. But I just wanted to bring that up as a side point. So, because you were seeing these things before even that occurred. And then that's just because of your position as being an elder.
And as an elder, I was getting more and more discouraged about, I hate to say it, the quality of the publishers. Many of them had extreme emotional problems, or, and I know it all went back to, very dysfunctional families that they were raised in. And you just didn't have the people that were,
Yeah, but wasn't by the time that you were starting to wake up and everything, you were starting to go to therapy?
I started going to therapy, and it was a witness therapist I went to. I had to sign a release that if she discovered any bad things I did in the past, she can immediately report it to the elders.
Which, by the way, viewers, is highly unethical and illegal.
Yeah.
If you ever hear of a therapist or any kind of doctor talking about disclosing your medical information like that, call and get them reported, because that is illegal. I know this for a fact because I used to work in medical records, and I know how those kinds of things are supposed to be revealed. And it's not for them to say, hey, you have to sign this to tell me I have to reveal it. No.
Yeah. And just a few years back, I heard of an experience on the site that I was on, Jehovah's Witness site, and he was relaying, almost sounded like me, went to a female therapist, and she made me sign this document. Well, I emailed him. I said, did you go to so-and-so? And, he goes, oh, no, I live out in California. So it was not only happening where I came from in Florida, but it was also happening out in California.
Oh, yeah. So let's switch directions here a little bit. We've talked quite a bit about your experiences as an elder, and I know there's many more.
You scraped the tip of the iceberg.
I know. And perhaps we can talk more about it another time and do another video about it. But let's talk to you, Mom, and let's hear from you and about your experiences, after I was born and being an elder's wife, and just some of the things that you had to go through being an elder's wife. Yeah.
Well,
weren't you like the queen of the congregation? And, you were just so perfect, and everybody else had to meet your standards,
yes,
right?
Sure. I know there's been a lot of chatter on different sites about how the elders' wives were elderettes and they judgmental. I was pretty judgmental, to tell you the truth, but
witnesses are taught to be judgmental, period.
I was.
So,
I was more judgmental than he was, but I really wasn't privy to much. He kept everything that was confidential, supposed to be confidential, he kept from me. I did not know, and a lot of times I would if I was out in a car group for service, you know, and they'd start talking about something, I'd come back and I would tell him I was the tattletale. I really was. And yeah, it was not. I think being an elder's wife at that time, there was a lot I didn't know, and I wasn't in on the cliques in the congregation. We were never part of cliques that would meet together. We were kind of on the outside of that. So I really didn't know a lot of the inner stuff of the congregation. He told me a little bit, but nothing confidential.
Well, can I insert one thing? You were very judgmental on how I would, you know, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that?
Mm-hmm.
And I would always tell you, dear, you don't know
Yeah.
the half of what's going on
Yeah.
in this congregation.
I didn't.
And you know, we're doing real well compared to what everybody else was doing.
Yeah, I did not know. I was one of the ignorant, naive ones.
And that I would actually say is a testament to you, Dad. You know, you were doing your job to the best of your abilities, basically.
Yeah.
And I say that because you were doing what you were told, what you thought was right at the time, and so you were doing it what you thought was the right way to do it. And
Yeah.
whereas these other elders who were telling their wives stuff and everything, letting them in on confidential stuff that Mom didn't know, they really weren't. But yet they're the ones that get away with anything,
Mm-hmm.
whereas you guys are the ones that would have gotten in trouble for everything.
We walked pretty much the straight and narrow as far as the organization was concerned. We
Yeah,
did.
we did. For the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the most part.
And we had our things, but
You know,
nothing that would hurt anybody, I can
No.
tell you that.
the worst thing that ever happened to your mom and I was we were just married.
Oh,
And went to we're newlyweds. We're happy. We're laughing. You know, we're giggly. Went to a restaurant, and it was a restaurant, not a bar. And we had a beer. We both had a beer, and we had these hamburgers that we absolutely enjoyed. And we're laughing and joking. And there, unbeknown to us, there was this witness couple in there. Actually, the husband wasn't a witness, but the wife was. And they reported us to the elders as being drunk. And they actually formed a committee on us without even talking to us and invited us in the back room. I mean, your mom and I are like a month married.
Yeah.
And they were telling, reading us the riot act. I mean, I was just absolutely flabbergasted.
about being drunk in public. We were drunk in public, according to the report.
Yeah, and I says, we were not drunk. And, but I was a kid, young, and I was always taught never talk back to your elders. Literally, didn't matter, just older people. And we just took it on the chin.
See, I've related a couple of experiences where I went and talked back to the elders in the hall,
Yeah.
but those were times when I knew they were categorically wrong, and I always had the feeling that if they're wrong, they should know they're wrong. Not that was necessarily trying to be a bull in a china shop or anything, but there was a way to do things.
Well, aren't you a smart little Alec?
Even though my name is James. So let's move on then. So we've covered quite a bit already. Now let's move ahead and start talking about your waking up process.
Ooh.
And Mom, I'm going to start with you and this is also the reason why I made sure that we talked about the blood transfusion issue, because this was big in your waking up process.
I was very adamant about not taking blood and all of this. And I mean, I would argue with people at the doors about it. I really would go into it. But then one Sunday, we were in near Gainesville, Florida. I got the Gainesville Sun. It was a January issue. I don't remember the exact date. There was an article in there by Carrie Louderbeck Wood, and she was an attorney that handled a lot of cases for Jehovah's Witnesses. And she wrote an article about the tort of blood. I don't remember that much about the article per se, but I remember seeing a website. And we were on the internet at that time, and I memorized it because I didn't want to write it down. I didn't want anybody else to see it. I didn't want him to see it. And it was ajwrb.com. And I would just kept ajwrb.com, ajwrb.com. And then when I had an opportunity, I went and I looked it up. And I started reading and reading and reading about blood. And I realized that taking blood transfusions could be life-saving in a lot of situations. Not all, but in a lot. And by this time, the society had decided that there were 4 categories of blood that were absolutely forbidden. They call them the 4 major components of blood, but they're not really, from a scientific standpoint, they weren't. But now, and they started saying, well, how could you break it down and take parts of it, but you can't have the whole thing? And it started to make sense to me. And from there, I started looking up other websites and reading about it. And I landed on JWN, which is Jehovah's Witness.net and .com. They've had 2 different iterations of it. And just reading different experiences. And that's where I also began learning about the UN. And how, when we were studying the Revelation book, how many times did we go through the Revelation book? At least 3 in my memory. At least 3 in my memory. And even having to change certain things in it from the second ones, maybe more.
It could be more.
But it could have been. I said from my
Too
memory.
many times.
And they were. But
that was tough to sit through as a kid.
They were members of the United Nations as an NGO, which is a non-governmental organization. And they, as a member of the United Nations, they had to write articles supporting the United Nations. At the same time, we were studying in their book about how the United Nations was a wild beast.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me make a little side note on that. The organization gave the excuse that they joined the United Nations because they wanted to get a library card.
Yes.
Now, that is categorically false because they do not need to join to get that library card. On top of that, part of them joining, like my mom was just saying, was to write UN positive articles. And also they had to sign like some sort of declaration promoting them and praising them in some way to join the United Nations. So really, that's just showing how hypocritical they were when they joined up.
And another, I'm going to jump to another thing that I learned on the internet was I remember in the 70s, I believe, we were writing letters to Malawi about the persecution in Malawi, how bad it was, and how they couldn't buy a political card for 25 cents, and the authorities were burning the witnesses' homes and taking them out and imprisoning them. Horrible persecution. And we were admonished to write letters to the Malawi government. Then I learned that at the same time in Mexico, they were encouraging the brothers to bribe the authorities to get out of military service. How hypocritical can you be?
Yeah, no kidding.
That was so, and I was like, these things just started falling in place for me. But now, what do I do with this knowledge? He was an elder, not just an elder. He was the presiding overseer of the congregation we were in. Yes, you were in Stark. And how am I going to handle this? I just kept learning. And I had a computer, like I said, because I was looking up websites. And when I'd go on the computer and I'd look up these websites, then I'd make sure I would erase the history. Now, he never went on my computer. This was just how paranoid I was about it.
Well, this is what
At
the
the time.
organization does to you when you're
Yes.
waking up. They have you that paranoid that you're going to hide it from your spouse.
Yes, and I was hiding everything from him, from that. I
Terribly
was
sneaky.
just like I was with my parents when I was coming in. Remember?
She already had old tricks to fall back on, Dad.
I knew
Taking me to
I was-
birthday parties.
I was experienced. What can I say?
My mom, the trickster.
Yeah. Ooh, I never noticed.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that one point when you were talking about the UN. The reason they made that statement, they were part of it because of whatever they said they were going to do with it, was only because they got caught.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And do you remember how they got caught?
I don't quite remember.
There was an article in The Guardian, which is a British
Yeah,
newspaper,
oh, it is.
that, well, you might know, but I explain stuff like that for our viewers as well. But that exposed it, and somebody wrote into headquarters about it, and just as soon as headquarters got wind of people writing in about it, they went and revoked their membership as soon as they could. And to me, that's getting your hand caught in the cookie jar anyways, because you're not saying you weren't part of it, but you pulled yourself out of it as soon as you got caught. It's just like,
Yeah.
what's the point now?
Yeah.
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 But go ahead, Mom. Continue on with your waking up story.
Well, that went on for a while, and then I think Dad comes into the picture a little bit now. Maybe you
Yeah.
want to go to your waking
Okay,
up
let's
story.
go ahead and
Yeah.
talk about you then.
Well, basically, I had I went through therapy for 1 year, and I think it was started in '06 and all of '07, and I think maybe 1 month in '08, and that was it. I felt I was pretty much done with it, but what the person discovered was I was horribly ADHD, and I got on Ritalin. I'm still on it to this day, and if I wasn't on Ritalin, my wife would be shooting me with a gun because I was really bad, and she was amazed at how different things were. But the Ritalin also helped my brain to settle down to reason. And, that's exactly what a Watchtower don't want. Anybody that can reason and think things out. They don't want any critical thinking. Well, anyway, I was on this Ritalin, and I started seeing things and starting to understand things better. And there was just certain things that were not making sense. Little things. It's like, when you tear down a brick wall, you could take out one brick and it ain't going to crumble. But then, as time went on, this brick, that brick, that brick, that brick, until it finally crumbled down and you see the whole picture. Well, during that time of, especially that conversation I had with that circuit overseer about pedophiles, that was one of the bricks. Other little things that were taking place in the congregation that I knew of, a situation where a retired circuit overseer was lording it over the whole congregation, and I had to take him to task, and we were trying to get him removed because he was doing some things that were not right. And
Was that it's Stark?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the circuit overseer would not allow it to happen. He says, "Well, I think we ought to drop it because I'm going to retire one of these days, and I would hate to think I was treated this way," even though he was rebuked, for what he did. But at any rate, that was another brick, a couple of bricks.
Now, wasn't he and another family too involved in a family feud in that congregation?
Yes. Yeah.
So that all plays into it as well. I'm sure.
Yeah. Even your grandparents were in many family feuds in the congregations they were in. I mean, things had happened. So at any rate, I was a friend of ours in that congregation. He wanted to know if I'd go up. He was constantly going up to Bethel and volunteering his time for a week or two in Brooklyn. And he wanted to know if I wanted to go one summer. And I said, yeah, that's fun. I really want to do it, So I went up there and we worked, and we were basically where all the famous buildings there, you know, where they printed all the literature. Of course, all those printers were gone. They were just big empty buildings, and we were painting them and repairing them, getting them ready to be sold. Well, as we were there, I walked around Brooklyn Heights, and I knew that they owned a lot of property in Brooklyn Heights. I think at the time, was it 30 buildings, something like that. But anyway, I was going to some of these buildings. Some of them were quite famous. Nothing was being done there. I mean, they weren't producing literature. There was no, you know, like communication center, nothing. All they were there for was to house people to maintain these buildings. Well, when I got back from that, I was telling Barbara about that. And I said, I just don't understand. I just don't understand this. To me, being in construction all my life, I always felt, okay, you got these buildings, you got to use these buildings. You just don't let them sit there. And, you know, just couldn't understand it. And then I was watching the History Channel on the flood. I know it sounds so silly. Everything's like, what? How's that have to do with this? Well, I watched it. It made so much sense because it talked about it couldn't have happened. And they gave all this scientific reasoning. I go, you know, it was like the wall was ready to crumble. And because so many bricks were taken out. And I went to Barbara and I said, you know, I've just seen this. I was excited. I was explaining to her, gee, I wonder if there's any information on that. And you go.
And I was waking up at the time. So I said, I'll be happy to do some research for you, honey.
Of course.
Yeah. So I went on the internet and I printed out reams of paper on why the flood didn't happen, all the scientific reasons, and I gave it to him. And that was the catalyst for us to sit down.
We were basically waking up separately.
We were waking up separately together.
Right.
But
You weren't talking to each other yet about it.
No, we were both scared to talk to each other about it.
And just for clarification purposes, what year was this happening in? Like 07, 08?
About 08.
Yeah, around 08. Yeah, your grandpa died in 09.
Right.
Yeah. We were awake before he died.
Yeah, we were pretty much awake by then.
Right.
Yeah. So at any rate, she gave me all this stuff. And then I asked her, boy, I wonder if there's any sites I can go on. Da-da-da-da-da. And your mom was, oh, of course. And she introduced me to JWN. And I was, I wasn't a troll, but I never.
You didn't have an account yet?
It took me a year and a half before I got an account. I was so scared. And when I did, I don't know what I thought. I was just terrified.
Oh, yeah. I did too. When I got my account, I took out a separate email address to have for the account because I didn't want anything coming.
And I look back, holy cow!
Sneaky.
See,
you know how the cult has you by the throat. You were scared to look at something else besides
what they want you to see.
But you found out on the site about Ray Franz and the book that he wrote.
Yeah.
And you came to me and you said, where are you hiding Crisis of Conscience?
Yeah, I knew she had it.
And he just knew I had it. I said, I don't have it. I'm not hiding it. He said, well, order it.
Well, but go along with that story, I was learning all these different things, and I told your mom, I says, all right, I know as far as what elders do and this and that, I know what is true and what isn't. And if I see anything there that anybody's, telling lies that don't really happen in the organization, I will catch it. And that was the way with Ray Franz's book. When I read it, I says, if I see anything in there, I know that's not it. And I read it, and I go, damn, he's right on, spot on the whole thing, And so finally I learned something about the cross. Now, I was raised to believe the cross was pagan and yada, yada, yada. Well, and of course, I think it was in the late 20s, early 30s, they condemned using the cross. They used to have the cross and the sword.
The cross and the crown.
A crown, I mean, for all those of anointed. Matter of fact, we had a very good friend, sweet woman. She knew Russell personally, and she had her cross and crown. She would show, and she'd go, and this was funny. She's the anointed. She was getting really up in years at this time. She says, I was supposed to throw this away, but I kept it. She showed me, you know. She was proud of it. It was kind of neat to see a relic like that.
Right.
Well, at any rate, I learned about the cross and that they didn't take it off of the watchtower till 1943. At the time Rutherford died. Whenever Rutherford died, but the cross was on front of the watchtower, at least up in the mid-40s, already 20 plus years when they condemned the cross. And so I said, okay. So I had to go to, this was my last elder school I ever went to, and it was for presiding overseers. I remember it was in '09, and we went to Patterson. I was there for a week. And they had their library there, of course. Well, one night, it was an evening, and I was just, oh, that's just their library. How interesting. There was no one in there. And I went over to the Watchtower volumes, and I started looking at them. I knew exactly what year, and I went there. Damn, they have the cross on their Watchtower. And then finally, as soon as Rutherford died, shortly after that, they eliminated it. And I'm going, huh. So that was really the last brick.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it was just, it was,
Right.
not right. I didn't call it a cult at that time. It took me quite a few years, even after I left permanently, to call it a cult.
Now, what year was it that you officially left?
Well, I resigned as an elder at the end of December of 2010. And shortly after that, I walked out that night out of the Kingdom Hall, and I says, I'm never coming back in here again. Well, we ended up going to the memorial with you.
Right, because I was still in.
You were still in. So we went to the memorial with you, and I think we told you that we were leaving at the time.
Well, we had talked a lot about at that time,
Yeah.
because even at that point, I was starting to have my doubts.
Yeah.
And, I had gone through, and I had been on that website, the same one you guys were on, and read some stuff. And I knew there was a lot of things not right, but I still wasn't at that point yet for me, where it was like, okay, no, this is completely wrong. I need to get out of here. I wasn't at that point yet.
I understand, and so if you want to put a date on it, I guess we'll say April of 2011, because we went to the memorial. But before that,
we were PIMOs, physically and mentally out.
Well,
for quite a while.
even then,
yeah,
a specific date, I'm just time frame is okay too.
Yeah.
And I only asked that because coming up this year, really, you're coming up on 10 years, completely out of the organization. But this was 2011-ish time frame, right? So I'm still living down there near my in-laws in Florida. Okay, I'm partially out. Tim is partially out.
Yeah.
My brother, my older brother, and I remember we had a lot of conversations back then about the organization, about things that were wrong, not just within the organization, but also doctrinally. One of the big things was 1914.
Yeah.
And I even remember me when I was having my doubts back then, I even went to the elders in my congregation at the time. I was in Spring Hill at that time.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And telling them, hey, I've had doubts, and I told them, especially about 1914, right? And so they're like, well, let's have a couple of us come by and, study with you. Well, they came by and they showed me absolutely nothing. What's their typical answer? Whatever's in the literature that Watchtower prints. They didn't come in with anything from outside to really solidify it, to prove it. None of that. So when they left that day, I was just still like, no, you really didn't answer my question. So, and before I moved to Virginia the first time in 2013, I was actually at that point ready to leave and walk out. I was going to use that move as my chance and be done with it, and I didn't. And so this is the part of the story that really shows how screwed up the organization makes you, because of what happened from here on out. Because you guys totally left.
Yeah.
I didn't totally leave.
No, no.
Okay? Even when I moved to Virginia, I still stayed in. And then my brother, he was out. He was fully out pretty much
Yeah.
Yeah.
at that time because of this.
I think more so than your mom and I was at first.
Right, because I mean, like we were talking about earlier, you know, he was chewing tobacco, smoking cigars,
Yeah.
you know, motorcycle, you know, you name it, you know. And then fast forward to like 2014, 2015, and I was starting to think I need to get myself back into it more. And then, of course, what does my brother do? He starts going back into it as well. Mm-hmm. Now, the difference is he went in full hog. He was, you know, fully devoted to going back in. Even when I said I was going back in, I still maintained the same basic routine that I had all along, which was I'd go to a meeting here and there. I'd go out in service here and there, just enough to keep everybody off my back, especially my in-laws. And this is the part of the story I really wanted to come to at this point, was where my brother and I started going in together. What did we do?
Well, first we got a letter from our oldest son, Tim, and he just, you know, basically blasted me and hated me for everything I ever did in my life.
Hang on, I want to pause you right there. I don't mean to be rude and interrupt, but I want to make a little statement about this before you go on. And I want to say that despite these letters that we're about to talk about, we're not here bashing him in any way.
Right.
We still love him very much.
Yeah.
Okay? And I just want to make sure that we emphasize that, because it's a very emotional thing that we're about to talk about, but we still love him and still want the best for him. This is just the things that the organization does to people. It messes with your mind, it messes with your family relations, and it messes with your emotions. But we still love him, and we still care for him. And if you ever see this, I want you to know that I love you and want the best for you. And I hope that you see what this organization has done to our family. So,
thanks for that.
Go ahead, Dan.
And we concur.
Yeah, and we love you too, son.
We
love you very much. We think about you often and your family. At any rate, we got the letter. And it was funny, we got the letter shortly after we had, because for several years, he knew we were out, and we would talk over the phone for many years, because he lived in South Carolina, we were living in Pennsylvania, and a subject came up on whether we believed in God or not, and we basically said, no, we've pretty much become atheistic, and we don't believe there's a God. Well, something struck him in a strange way, and he got very upset. He just insisted there had to be a God, and that's fine. Fine, you can believe in God, but we don't. And he went off, and then we received the letter, and oh my God, and I think I talked to you over the phone about it shortly. We got a letter from you too.
Mm-hmm.
And it hurt a lot. It hurt an awful lot. I felt some of the accusations weren't true. Others were true. I know I was not the perfect father. Unfortunately, because of the cults, the abuse I went through as a child, I'm not using that as an excuse, because one thing you learn in therapy, you're responsible for your actions, and I am responsible. And I did apologize to both my boys for that when I learned that, about the things that I did and didn't do as a father. But nonetheless, he was still very angry about it. And I understood, and I think we just sent him a simple note that says, you know, we love you. If you ever want to talk to us about this again, you know, we're open to talking to you. And we left him alone. We were not going to infringe and say, you know, try to change his mind anyway.
And we didn't try to go point by point, you know, refuting anything he said either.
No.
So we just...
Unfortunately, when you wrote your letter, I'm only laughing because it's so sad.
Yeah, I wrote a letter too.
And there was things that was stated in James' letter that categorically was not correct. And I was angry, and your mom was trying to stop me from not refuting it. And I said, I have to, and I did. But yet, I think we still left it that, you know, we love you. And anytime you want to talk to us, you know, we're there for you.
And just for the viewer's sake, I actually did some videos on these letters, and I call them my vomit letters. And in those videos, I read word for word. I read the draft letter from my brother and the letter that he actually sent to mom and dad. And then I read my letter that I sent to mom and dad. I didn't have my draft. And then I also read the letter that my dad sent back to me.
Yeah.
So if you want to check those out, I'll put the link in the description below.
So, at any rate, that was that. And your mom and I, you know, we talked a lot about this. We felt that, you know, maybe one day we'll see either you or Tim again.
Or both.
Or both, or the children.
And don't get too ahead on that point yet, okay?
But anyway, that's where we're at. And we went on with our lives.
Yeah.
Period. And, can I bring this one point out? When we left, I want you to know this. We did not go out to bars and get drunk. We did not start taking drugs. We did not do wife swapping and, you know, and all these other array of horrible things. We just continued to lead a normal life like we were, but we didn't have the cult dictating everything that we had to do in our lives. And I mention this because this is one of the things the cult, the Watchtower, has used many times to put fear in people about leaving the organization.
And they also put the fear of in you that when you leave, how people who weren't witnesses are going to just treat you terribly.
Yes.
And, you know, always be out to get you in some way or another. And that is categorically false, because I've made some excellent friends since leaving. And I know my parents have too.
We got friends now that they know how to, they show true love towards you, not because they're told to do it, because they want to do it.
Because that's the people they are.
That's the people they are.
Now, I wanted to bring out, let's go back to the time when my brother and I were going back in. And this is something I wanted to relate, because I remember this. And looking back, I hurt because of this. And I remember calling my mom up, and I remember telling you that I wasn't going to talk to you anymore. That basically, without using the word shunning, I was telling you I was going to start shunning you from that point on. And I remember you saying, well, you know, I understand this is the way I raised you, and me being haughty and arrogant about it. And I'm like, well, yeah, you raised me right, and I thank you for that, you know. And I know I've apologized to you about it. I know you guys understand, but at the same time, looking back at it, it still hurts. It doesn't go away. And these are the kinds of things that this organization drives you to do, thinking you're doing something right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tell you right now, shunning family that loves you is never right. Now, if they were abusive to me, if they were terrible to me in some ways, I could see exceptions for that, but they weren't. My parents loved me. They did the best they could for me, and they've always shown me love. That wasn't right. So.
I want to say that through this, we maintained a thin cord of connection on Facebook. You and I were both on Facebook, and I was on Facebook with your wife. I was even on Facebook with your mother-in-law for a while, but she left. And it's through Facebook that I learned that you guys had a third son.
Oh, jeez, yes, I forgot about that. No, but
Because
you know
Crystal
what? Though?
posted a picture of it.
But you know what, though? You forget one thing, though. I unfriended you on Facebook.
Oh, did you? I didn't even realize
I did.
Yeah, I remember that. It was Crystal, I think you found out.
Crystal kept up.
Crystal kept you, and she never unfriended you, and that's how you found out was through her. I unfriended you.
Did you
right,
really?
yeah.
I didn't remember that. See, I didn't remember that.
So,
because we were before that, we were wondering where the heck you were.
Yeah.
We didn't know you were living in Virginia. We didn't know where you were at.
no, you didn't. Well, you knew I moved to Virginia.
Yeah.
You knew that part, but you didn't know that I moved to Tennessee for a while.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I go, and we were worried because at that time we knew through, we know how we find out things before the friends do in the organization. We found out that they were really pushing, young children to get baptized. They were even talking about 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds. And I go, that's insane. And we were worried that
your kids
were doing this.
And Tim's kids. But.
Very worried.
Yeah.
So, I want you to talk about a little bit more about that period of your lives when both Tim and I were shunning you hardcore. And I know you said you had you wrote the letter back and you figured, you got to just go ahead and move on with your lives, which I understand, because it's like treating somebody like they're dead in a way. And so what were you guys doing? How did you cope with that?
I think we just steeled our minds to the reality that was happening and tried not to think about it too much, except we always, we would say, well, I wonder how Tim's doing. I wonder how James is doing. I wonder how the grandkids are doing. But we made friends and we moved on.
Well, it was those friends that supported us.
Those friends that supported us, yes, they did. They were very supportive, even though they hadn't a clue what we came out of until we started talking. But
and we're talking about non-witness people showing true, unconditional love.
They sat for hours and listened to us.
Just cry.
And we just poured out a lot of things that was happening. And I mean, this really helped us get through a lot. And I've got to give a lot of credit to my cousin, Susie Brooks. She was there in Stark when I was first waking up. And we talked for hours about what was going on in the organization and in our personal lives and just on and on and on. We just poured it out. And she was so supportive. And Susie, if you ever hear this, thank you so very, very much. You don't know how much I appreciate that time.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. And it was mostly like your mom said, but we came across a group of really wonderful people. Dumb luck, like everything in this area. And because of that, we had a support group that really understood. And most of our friends are highly educated friends, unlike myself. And but yet they showed such kindness and love. Your mom and I were always flabbergasted they would invite us over. Then they would invite us over, and they would always have a little gift for us, or this or that. And, you know, and they just talked. And there was times we didn't want to talk about it, but we were kind of like pulled into talking about it. But we didn't want to talk about it, but yet it was good therapy for us. And
It was like going, like you said, it's like somebody died and you're going through all these stages of grief. You go through denial and then there's...
Except with the fact that the people that you lost are still alive.
Exactly.
And that's what is really the most hurtful part about that.
And also, the other thing along with that, son, was when we told our friends about this, they just couldn't believe. It was beyond their belief that family would do that to another member of a family. It was inconceivable in their minds.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that really led to us talking a lot about what a cult does. And we started reading books. Steve Hastings, one big book we read. And your mom became more of an expert, gave several talks on it to individuals and stuff on that. Not that we were the big so-called apostates trying to convert people. We were just putting information out there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and I hate that you used that word in that context, because an apostate is simply a person who leaves a religious or a political group. That's it. And I say that out of importance because the organization demonizes anybody who leaves. And that's, you know, for any viewers who aren't witnesses or have never been a witness, they use that word apostate as somebody who is worse than some of the worst criminals in maximum security prison.
But yet, and I agree with you, son, on that, but facetiously, I wear that name of mentally diseased apostate as a badge of honor because it meant we woke up and we know exactly who they are.
Oh, I know. And in the ex-Jehovah Witness community, it is a badge of honor because we know what we came from. We know what we got out of. And now we have the privilege or honor, whatever you want to call it, to help others to realize what these cults do to people and avoid these cycles of abuse from continuing on. So, anyways, let's move a little bit more forward. So, I think it was, I want to say, was it 2014 or 2015 when I made that phone call to you? Before we started shunning you?
Oh, before you shunning. Yeah, I you know, I don't.
Well,
you know, I don't even.
It had to be. It was at least before my third child was born, because you didn't know about him being born, because I wasn't talking to you until you saw it on Facebook. So, from that time frame to 2018 was. I want to hear from you, Mom, especially on this, because in 2018, it was about April, May, June, for me, when I fully woke up and I realized I need to get out of this. So you guys have already been out since the end of 2010, early 2011. Here I come along 7-8 years later, and not only that, but I have also been shunning you for several years. Both of you, hardcore shunning, not talking to you, emailing you, nothing. You had no idea what was going on in our lives, except for what little you saw on Facebook. And even then, I unfriended you on Facebook, so it was even less at that point.
Can we stop for a second?
Yeah.
We can please?
Yeah.
I really need a break.
Yep. We can stop.
I'm sorry, but I thought this would be a good spot to stop. Because you're going to get into some hardcore, and I can't sit here anymore.
All right, let's go ahead and pick back up here. And we're going to go back to the time now when I started waking up. and was coming out. And this was in about April, May, June when I fully woke up. And I'm not going to go and tell my story because I've already got my complete story I put out here on the channel already. But I want to hear from you, Mom, because you're the first one I contacted. Do you remember how I contacted you?
You contacted me. You messaged me on Facebook.
Yes, I did.
You asked me for a phone number.
Nope.
Yeah?
I asked for your email address.
Yeah.
Oh, my email address.
I asked for your email address.
Yep.
Okay.
And I remember all I did was ask for your email address. I didn't say anything else.
Okay.
And the reason why is because, again, at that point of my waking up process, like you guys, when you were skirting around each other, when you were waking up and not telling each other, I wasn't telling my wife yet either. And
Oh, that's right.
and so I wanted your email address because I didn't want to put that on a Facebook message. And so I thought email was safer for me at the time. So proceed. Go ahead and talk about that email.
Well, I got that email from you, and I just sat there and read it, and I read it, and then I said, David, I was upstairs,
Yeah.
and he was down here, and I go, David, you've got to get up here right now.
And I go, what? What do you want? What's so important? Because she was always doing that. David, come up here.
And I wouldn't tell him. You need to get up here now.
Yeah.
And he came running up begrudgingly.
I go, what?
Yeah, what's the matter? What's going on? And I said, look, you got to read this. And we sat there and we read it. And we just started crying.
Yeah, held each
and
other.
Holding each other. Oh my gosh. It was like, is this true? I can't believe it. We're going to be a family again. It's like, oh gosh.
Brought tears to our eyes.
Yeah.
We were crying.
We were. And we were shaking and crying.
Yeah, we held
both.
each other for 5-10 minutes.
Oh my
I don't know
gosh,
how long
it
it was.
seemed like a long time. It was like the happiest day of our lives, basically, other than the day you were born. Actually, this was even happier than the day you were born.
Yeah, it was a pretty rough day.
Yeah.
It was all these emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, of course. I mean, I went from being in your lives, growing up, and then finally you guys leaving, to me shunning you hardcore, to me waking up and reuniting with you guys. It's like being resurrected.
Yeah.
And then I remember after we had all these discussions, I said, okay, he's waking up. What about Crystal? We were so concerned about her relationship with her family, her mother and her father and her sister and her
Especially her
brothers,
sister and brother,
especially,
yeah.
And we knew she was very close to all of them, and we go, oh my gosh.
But here's the thing, okay? A couple things about that. She, from the time we were dating, told me she didn't ever want to be one. The only reason she stayed a witness was because of me. The only reason she ever got baptized was because of me.
Dear.
Okay? She never believed it. But what had happened was, we moved to Tennessee, and at that time, that was me trying to be a better witness. And I say that because the job I had wasn't one that the witnesses allowed. Again, controlling everything you do in your life. I had a job that the witnesses didn't approve of. And so part of me trying to be a better Jehovah's Witness was moving away to Tennessee to where my in-laws were because they were retiring at the time. I thought, okay, well, if I live close to, the JW side of the family, that'll help me be better. And we get over there, and I still haven't changed a bit, okay? I still was sporadic at meetings. I still wasn't out in service, like they wanted you to be, just enough to keep people off your back, basically. And when I started waking up, it's not that I didn't remember that she told me she didn't believe it. It was that we were living over there close to her family. We were doing things with them all the time. And I was worried about upsetting that for her because I knew what, having family in your life meant. And at the time, for me, that was the family I had as well. Okay? Even, I know it's a screwed up thing to say out loud.
We get it, but people won't get it unless they really, we tell people, I tell our friends, I say, you don't understand unless you've lived it. And that's basically true.
And it's true because while I'm shunning you guys, my wife's side of the family that's still in is now my family. Even though you guys are still alive and healthy.
Mind-blowing.
It is.
Yeah.
And so here I am. My biggest worry for her, well, it wasn't just for her, it's for my kids as well, because that's their grandparents. That's an aunt and an uncle, couple of aunts. And is losing all that for them as well. It wasn't me I was too worried about. It was them.
Yeah.
And I remember the day Crystal was working night shift at that time, and I was actually on days. We're reversed now, but she came home from work one morning, and it was a Sunday morning. We had made plans to go to the meeting with her parents. Her dad was giving a talk that day, and then we were going to go over to their house for lunch afterwards. And she knew I had been struggling with it for a time. And then she came home, and I remember she was in the shower, and I was standing there talking with her. And she asked me, she goes, "Do you believe it anymore?" And I remember at that moment of time in my head, I'm like, okay, well, do I say yes and keep this going? Or do I say no and let the cards fall where they will with this? Well, I decided to say no. Because I really didn't. Obviously, I didn't believe it anymore at that point. And she just goes, okay, let's go. Now, so we went to her parents' meeting that day, and then we were at lunch later. She is the wear her heart on her sleeves kind of person. And her whole countenance that day was just, was completely nervous and scared about the prospect of leaving. Not that she didn't want to, but actually doing it is now becoming a reality. Okay? And so her dad obviously was perceptive enough that day to see something was wrong on her face. And I was outside with him later that day, and he's like, "Hey, is something wrong with Crystal? Something doesn't seem right." I'm just like, "Oh, she's okay, probably just depressed, I kind of try to sugarcoat it, blow it off, get him to not talk about it. The next day, he texts her. He's like, "I asked James this yesterday, but I don't think he was completely honest with me. Is everything okay?" Well, she kind of spilled the beans a little bit at that point to her parents. Whatever. But it's just the from that period of time, you know, I was woken up, Crystal was ready to go, we're reuniting, and as part of that reuniting, do you remember what happened every week?
Every night.
Oh, yes.
Well, it wasn't every night. It was
No.
before I came out to Crystal. It was only the night she was at work.
Yeah.
What was I doing, guys?
You were out in your backyard a lot because you didn't want your kids to hear. I remember that.
Yep.
And you were hiding from them, and we were on the phone with you for hours there, I guess.
We would be on the phone for at least 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
Every night.
Catching up.
Just catching up. I mean, 3 or 4 years is a long time to catch up on.
Yeah.
On top of
Answering your questions of doubt that you had and why you believe this now. We were reinforcing
And
things.
where do we go? And where do we all go from here?
where do we go from here, right? And so finally, I came out to Crystal. So she started talking to you guys again
Yeah.
with me.
Yeah, she called. I remember the first time she
Yes.
called us, and we were like, "Oh, okay. What are we going to say, and how are we going to phrase this?" We were worried because we didn't want to. I hate to use the word stumble her.
Yeah.
Right. But you were trying to be cautious and not go too crazy and over love bomb her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
So at any rate, but then things went on and on and on, and it was. And I remember she was saying, "Well, I'm sitting out in my car. James doesn't know I'm calling you." I remember that one time. I said, and I always find that funny. They both, how a husband and wife both wake up, but they're so terrified of each other to tell them how they feel about all this.
Well, because at that point, I hadn't told her that I was talking to you.
Yeah, I
guys.
know. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And we had to be careful not to.
To let on that you were talking
Right.
to
I'm
her.
guessing she knows all about it now.
I had never told her, actually.
No.
Oops. But
Well, she can watch the video.
and she won't. But, you know, it doesn't matter anyways,
Yeah.
though. You know, because at that point, our lives became, for those 6 months from the time I told her, especially from the time I told her, to the time we fully left. And for us fully leaving meant I came back and got my job back in Virginia again, the one I wasn't supposed to have. She got a job back again, and we moved away as our final exit. But from August to January, August of 2018 to January of 2019, our lives were so stinking busy.
Yeah. I remember.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. We did Halloween for the first time. We celebrated Morgan's birthday because by the time we had come out to our kids, it was just after Sadie's birthday. I'm sorry. And then we did Crystal's birthday. I surprised her with her birthday.
Yeah, I remember he took her up to Knoxville and
With a
found a
meetup.
bunch of ex-witnesses there.
We found an ex-witness group, and
they surprised you with a surprise party for her in many ways, didn't they?
no, not at all.
You knew about it?
I knew about it because I coordinated it with them.
Oh, okay. I thought they kind of surprised you a little bit.
No, because she had actually found this group the week of her birthday. She had found this
Maybe I got it back. Yeah,
XJW
okay,
group,
yeah.
right? And I didn't even know about it at this point, okay? So what happened is I asked her, who's the organizer of this group, right? So she gave me the person's name, and I went and I joined the group. And then I private messaged the guy in the group. I say, look, I know we haven't met yet. I go, we're freshly out. It's my wife's birthday this Saturday, and we're going to come up for the meetup for the first time. Can we surprise her with a birthday party, right? And he was like, yeah. He's like, I actually know somebody in the group who makes cakes and everything. I'll get you in touch with her. So he got her in touch with me, right? The cake maker. And I'm sitting there messaging them. And I remember I'm in my living room. I'm on my phone messaging them on Facebook Messenger. And Crystal was sitting in the living room. She's like, who are you messaging? And I'm like, at the time, I actually had some appliances up for sale that I needed to get rid of before the move too.
Yeah.
And I just told her, oh, I'm messaging people for the appliances I got for sale. Well, that's all. Oh, okay. You know, she didn't think nothing of it. Well, then that Wednesday, okay, of that week, I got an email from my now job. They had, one of the parts of it I had applied for was a job fair. Of all things that I get a response from, they wanted me to come up that very weekend that I was planning Crystal's birthday.
Yeah.
Okay? And so I told Crystal, hey, I got to go away for, you know, be there Saturday morning. So I had to take Friday off of work, drive to Virginia.
And then you came back. Yeah,
And then-
I remember that.
And Crystal was saying, well, do we need to cancel the meetup group? I said, no. We're still going to meet in Knoxville. I said, you meet me there, because she wanted to go to Cheesecake Factory for her birthday. So I wasn't going to deny that. So we went to I said, no, we're not going to cancel anything. We're going to do it. I said, I'm going to go to Virginia. I'm going to do my thing. It was early in the morning. It was like 8 o'clock in the morning. And I said, and I'm going to drive back. And you just drive to Knoxville and meet me there. And we'll have your birthday. And we'll go to the meetup group. And she's like, okay. You know, I'm like, we're just going to do it that way. So took her out. And of course, I had to let her have cheesecake because I couldn't spoil the surprise of the cake coming for her birthday party either. So, so she got her cheesecake at Cheesecake Factory, and then we went to the meetup group, and they brought the cake in and surprised her for her birthday. So it was a very fun time. It was a very stressful time,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it was also one of the happiest times in my life.
Yeah.
Here's the word, liberating.
Liberating, yes. But it was a very happy time in my life, reuniting with you guys.
Yeah, it was ours too. Our side of the story when after we got your not text,
Email.
email, and after we got done crying, and I think it was shortly after we talked to you, but after your email, I got on the phone, called our 3 closest friends, and told them. Remember?
Yeah.
We were
over the moon.
we were just like big smiles, you know. And I remember Rainey. You know, she was just, and she that week or the week after, she had us over for dinner
To celebrate.
to celebrate you coming back into the fold. You know, back to us. She was just so, because she was one of the ones that just could not imagine anything like that ever happen. And yet, as we told her more and more and more about the witnesses and how we had to live, you got to remember, her parents escaped from Nazi Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like 11 years old or something like that when she got out of there, old enough to remember stuff. And she starts saying, this sounds like the Nazi party, you know, what they did. And I go, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
It was. So we had that, and then of course the big event that came up later.
Well, after that, we finally that year. So we had actually been planning to come up to see them for Christmas, and we hadn't celebrated Christmas ever, and so
we taught them all the evils of celebrating Christmas. No.
I'm screwed now. But I remember we loaded up the car because we came up for Christmas. We had the car loaded.
We need to back up a little bit.
Go ahead.
Because you got Crystal with her birthday party. She wanted to get you.
That was later on, dear.
That was the following year.
That was the following year?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought that was that year.
No, that was just
No.
last year, honey, Mom.
No, this was the first.
Oh, this is the
Christmas.
first
This
year
is
they
the first-
came up
yeah.
for us. Yes.
We-
I'm sorry.
Remember, 2
I'm
dogs,
sorry.
3 kids.
I'm sorry.
Adults.
yes, okay. Let's just.
Cut, delete.
Yeah.
But so, no, we came up to your house here
Yes.
for Christmas that year, and I just remember we got the car loaded up. We had 2 big gray bins filled that we put on the back of our car with gifts and everything. And we actually got our own Christmas tree and had it up in our house. And this was
telling us about
our house in Tennessee, where anybody from the congregation could have come by and see it. And so we came up here, and I just remember getting out of the car and seeing you guys for the first time.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
I remember how long the hugs were.
Oh my goodness. Those were some of the best hugs I ever had.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that same next day we had that Christmas dinner we went to with all our friends.
And we got to introduce you.
And we introduced you to everybody. And we were like, somebody asked, "Why are you so happy, David?" I said, "See over there? That's our child and our daughter-in-law and our grandchildren, you know, really."
And you got to meet your youngest grandson for the first time.
That's right.
That Christmas.
Yep.
So, and I know it's kind of a cliche thing, but it was our first Christmas, and it was a white Christmas. It was and we reunited with our family, and it was one of the most beautiful things in my life.
Yeah.
It was really nice. Had a lot of meaning.
It really did.
That was our best Christmas ever.
And then you're forgetting one other thing.
Go ahead.
Caius's birthday is the day after Christmas.
And we had a birthday.
So when we went to your UU church there, the whole congregation there sang happy birthday to him. For his first birthday that he got to celebrate.
They were happy to do that. They loved, and we had a Christmas exchange, and they were so upset that they didn't have a gift for him. And so somebody gave him their present.
Yeah.
And it was an adult present. But
is he still using that steam kettle?
Yeah.
But when you stopped me, I was thinking, I lost my point on that. I can't remember now. There was something that was really special about all that too. I can't remember now.
It was all very special.
It was. I mean, just to be able, you know, to go through that, you know, and then you wake up and you reunite with your family.
Your grandkids got to go sledding here.
Oh, yes.
And got to play in the snow. I remember they just had a ball in that. And, of course, the parties. And, of course, they couldn't wait to open the presents on Christmas Day, so we made it a family tradition from that point onward that we always open our presents on Christmas Eve.
And we've done it. And now, I know this is only our 3rd Christmas, but we've been doing it on Christmas Eve every year.
And we will continue to do that.
And as of the filming of this video, today is Christmas Eve in 2020. And after we're done with this video, I'm separated from my wife and my other 2 children right now because of COVID and other extenuating circumstances.
I've had a lot of medical issues,
and so it was only my daughter and I that came up here this year. We're going to do a gift opening virtually with my wife and other 2 children after we finish here.
Also, all this video that you're seeing tonight is James's Christmas present. A lot of this lighting, the green apron behind the screen, all this stuff. So he's using his new Christmas present early to make this video.
Well, by the time I edit it, they won't see the green screen. They'll see something else behind us.
Oh, well.
I'm going to make your living room look like we're sitting out in the middle of the ocean or something.
He's turned my dining room into a studio.
Yeah, we pulled all the dining room into the living room.
I pulled it all out there, thank you.
But there was something else I want to say, but that's okay.
Okay, well, at this point, I'm going to wrap it up with this video. I just want to do one final thing, though, before we do. And I'm going to start with you, Mom. For anybody who's watching or listening to this video, is there any advice that you would like to give for those who are waking up, those who are doubting, or those who are interested in what the Jehovah's Witnesses have to say?
Well, I would say if you're waking up and you're starting to learn about the truth about the truth, as we like to call it, keep on researching and just keep on researching. If you have family, it's going to be hard. Everyone has to make their own path that way. If your means of living is dependent on working for witnesses or your family, make sure you make plans to make yourself financially independent. If you're young enough to go get an education, whether it be college or technical school or something to support yourself, do it as soon as you can. Make friends on the outside. You will find a wonderful support group on the outside. We were very fortunate both in Florida and up here in Jamestown, New York, to find support as we were leaving. And that made all the difference in the world in being able to reaffirm to ourselves that we were making the right decision. And we were very fortunate, I gotta say, to come out together as a couple. You've heard our story at the beginning. But I know from reading others that isn't always the case. And for those of you, I feel very, very sad for and hope things work out. Thank you.
I would have to say, I'll say two things. One, who was an elder for almost 25 years, I hear a lot of negative and bad things said about elders, and how people say they don't like them, they don't trust them, and you have reason for that. But remember, they're captives of a concept just as much as you are. And yes, there are those that abuse their powers, and I saw it. But just remember, we're basically all in the same boat because we're following information from the society, which is all wrong in many ways. They really didn't care about how your family was, or anything like that. And then also, when you start having these doubts and you're finding the way to say, hey, maybe this is not what it's supposed to be, keep asking questions. Keep asking questions. Go to your elders. Ask them questions. You'll find, if you do your research, they don't know what they're talking about. Even when you leave and you maybe get on a site where there's other fellow ex-witnesses on there, you got to ask them questions. Keep asking questions to them. See if they're giving you the right answers or if they're not. Some aren't, unfortunately. Some aren't. Some are out for whatever advantage they can get, but most of them are pretty honest. And you have to realize this is a long process. I was talking to James yesterday. We've been out 10 years, and I says, I'm just now finally starting to get over a lot of the fears I had, a lot of doubts, misunderstandings, whatever. They've kind of disappeared. And it takes time. And some of the things that I suffer with emotionally, I always will because of the cult. I always will. But I don't hate the friends. The friends, that's not who I hate. I hate the organization that caused all this.
I second that, for not hating the people that are still trapped in the cult.
No,
Absolutely.
We love the people that are trapped in the cult. We hate that they are trapped in such a mind-controlling organization. And I want to say one more thing, just leave with this thought. Don't be afraid to, I'd rather not be able to ask, okay, come on. I'd rather have
questions I can't answer than answers I can't question.
Yes, very true. So, anyways, I want to thank you guys very much
been
for
fun.
sitting down and doing this with me. I've been wanting to do this for quite a long time now, and I'm so grateful that we finally got to.
I just want to say, you're a great son. You treated us with a lot of kindness with this. You gave us outlines. You
Yes.
did all this. We really appreciate it. We love
And I
you
want
very
to give
much.
you a big hug for all of this. Thank you, Mom.
I love you.
We love you too.
Love you too, but I don't want to hug you. No, it's, but we're a family of sarcasm, and we have to stop that sarcasm one of these days. But at any rate, he did all this. He wrote out the outlines of what we talk about.
Yes,
And,
I controlled everything you said, every move you made,
And we
every breath
appreciate
you take.
And we appreciate that.
This
because
is
we're
the
so
cult
used
of
to it.
James, yeah.
So, but on that note, again, thank you guys. I really do appreciate you guys sitting down and doing this with me. I think this was a fantastic interview. I hope our viewers enjoy it as much as I have. And I
Hope
want
they don't get too bored with it by the time.
Well, I hope that we help somebody.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to leave on the message that I've tried to leave all my videos on is to love yourself, love others, and do no harm. And thank you for watching.